Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels. We are going back to the horrible world known as the JRC, in spite of me telling you I wouldn't today, because, yeah, I'm nuts. Anyways, first, the disclaimers and the trigger warnings. If you're unfamiliar with the Stop the Shocks campaign or the campaign against the troubled teen industry, all pertinent links are in the description box. We've got Autistic Hoya's massive archive on the subject, where we get literally almost all of the material regarding the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center comes directly from that link. So if you want to read along, you want to take a look at the documents yourself, please feel free. It's right there. There's a link also to Neuroclastic's article that they wrote where they interviewed over 800 ABA professionals in regards to the JRC's so-called behavior modification program. It got so deep under JRC's skin that they felt the need to threaten a very small non-for-profit with a defamation lawsuit if they didn't remove it from the website. But thankfully, as neurodivergents, we're a bunch of stubborn folk. In particular when we know we're right. So, obviously Neuroclastic refused. Please read the article. If it's so much getting up underneath their skin that they're trying to make it disappear, there's something in it very obviously that scares them. Read it and spread it around. We got a link to their GoFundMe in there as well, because unlike the JRC, us advocates either loners, ASAN, Neuroclastic, or People First. We're not made out of money, and we don't have access to unlimited resources. Help if you can. If not, please share that link so that other people can do what they can. We definitely would appreciate it. To our trigger warnings, when we do speak about places like the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center or Agape Boarding School for Boys, you are going to hear vivid descriptions of and catch clips or surveillance footage of people with mental health issues and disabled people being tortured and abused. If you got young children present, please utilize the headphones. Also, this channel is marked not for kids for a reason. We do use profanity. We very obviously speak on dark subjects. If your child's 16 and younger and watching this, very obviously supervision of the parents is advised. Now, also, for me, trigger warning. Sometimes reading this stupid triggers me, and I will go off into rants. Depending on the day, I may get lost in my own head while going through the rant and take a left turn. I do try to always steer it back to the subject, but sometimes it gets long-winded. So, if you ever need to, and if it's going on and on, just fast forward it. If it's really not something you want to risk, just take a look at the links in the description box. I promise you, it's not going to hurt my feelings, alright? I know how long-winded I can get. Alright, speaking of where we stopped yesterday, where they were sitting there saying that, but all the treatments the other place tried was unsuccessful. I did explain to the fact that the reason why had to do with the fact that the type of intervention that was available for EL at that facility was not the type of supports and services that he actually needed. He was having trauma responses. He needed somebody on his team who was a trauma-informed professional so that he would be able to receive the appropriate help. When it comes to those of us who've gone through trauma, afterwards the behaviors that crop up are not always new. Okay? A lot of times, especially with us autistic folk, it is some of the exact same behaviors we had been exhibiting previously, but then began to severely mask on top of suppressing a whole lot of emotions while going through it. When we are no longer forced to do that, when those behaviors do come back, when you're one of us and you've been through trauma, it may be the exact behaviors. The difference is in the intensity, the greater frequency, and the fact that those behaviors that were before were troubling may increase in regards to how dangerous that they become. This is extremely common, especially with us autistic neurodivergents that I have seen, spoke with, and interacted with who've gone through some horrific shit. It was the same way with me as well. That does not mean that it isn't a response to trauma. Just because the behaviors were there previously does not at the same intensity, frequency, or not quite as dangerous, does not mean that when those behaviors come back after leaving the traumatic situation, that it's not still a response to the trauma, because it very much is. In particular, with those of us who have to suppress so much of our own personality, our own neurodivergent body language, because contrary to popular belief, we do kind of have our own body language that is very separate from neurotypicals. We sit weird. Most of us walk weird, not in the same way, but all of us got kind of a little bit difference that separates out from our neurotypical peers. Okay? But it's still a trauma response. Okay? So, the best way to deal with that, the intensity, the alarming more frequently that they are coming out, this is a situation I can speak to with a certain level of real life experience here. What you need in these type of situations is exactly what we don't have apparently throughout the entirety of the East Coast. These two fields, two different teams even sometimes, need to be talking to each other and working together. This is why I will continue to complain about this cookie cutter ABA nonsense in regards to autism treatment until the day I croak. There are too many nuances with each of us to not make each particular plan, treatment program, circle of support to be built around the consumer as opposed to being builded around the diagnoses. Okay? There's too many variations. Anything even remotely resembling cookie cutter style is not going to work. So in situations like this, what ended up happening, and granted, I did have to do the advocating for it myself. Who does that surprise? It doesn't surprise me. Story of my damn life. Just saying. But what we did was we brought in the mental health professionals, particularly those who specialized in dealing with kids like myself who have been sexually assaulted and physically and psychologically abused. So what we did is we didn't throw out the baby with the bathwater. We married all of these elements together and brought it into the bigger part of the overall treatment plan. What made that easy? And yes, I am going to sound the same horn once again. What made that easy was the fact that we do have that foundation of my full functional behavioral assessment that I take every 2 years, just like clockwork. Modify here, modify there. If I need to bring in a primary care physician because there's something physical going on that might impact the other areas, that's why the thing is so important. There's so many different elements in there that it informs. To not have it, I don't even want to think about it. That's just horrifying. I don't even know how I would even begin to try to navigate without it. I don't want to think about it. Happy thoughts. I'm a woman who likes organization and efficiency, even if it doesn't look like it. Even when the place around me looks like a complete and utter mess, it is organized chaos. All right? Organized chaos. It is a thing. Don't care what neurotypicals have to say about it. Organized chaos is a thing. I will die on that hill. As I said, left field. But yeah, seriously. The right thing would have been bringing someone who was an expert in regards to those of us who begin manifesting behaviors or have behaviors come back and become more difficult, is to bring someone in who specializes in dealing with those of us impacted by trauma. That would be something that would be directly dealing with the triggers, directly dealing with the psychological trauma, and the beginning of the work to be able to work through all of that. When you pair that with the rest of the treatment program, granted, I may not be the sanest person in the world, folks. Believe me, I got the memo. I like to say that I have my crazy papers all nice, official, and orderly. But I can do okay. I can depend upon myself for work. I take care of my medicines, everything. I can provide for myself, my home, my cat. Because how those issues were addressed when I needed them to be addressed, I was able to work through the things that were making it so difficult for me, particularly in late teens, early 20s, to be able to function properly. That's why it worked. The answer here, again, going back to you don't send the survivor of child abuse back to the parents that they abused it just because they're manifesting and acting out due to the trauma they survived. So again, why are we doing it to disabled people? People like to say it's complicated, it's more involved than that. And the fact is, folks, it's really not. It's really not all that complicated. It is straightforward that a kid that was forced in such a horrific place, such as the JRC, was going to end up with severe trauma. It's also very logical to be able to see those behaviors, plus the new ones that he acquired afterwards when he was moved out of JRC, is the manifestations, the acting out, stemming from undealt with trauma. These are very logical and easy to come to conclusions when you read this. It shouldn't matter whether EL is neurodivergent or not in regards to how this whole situation should have been treated and handled. But it is. EL is just a good example, Exhibit A, if you will. Now, before I go closing out the video, we actually do need to get to the next sentence. So, before I get ahead of myself here, let's go back to this. His SIB and AB quickly and significantly decreased. EL engaged in approximately 249 AB and SIB in 30 weeks prior to resuming the GED treatment in 2023, and less than 10 total AB and SIB in 30 weeks following the reintroduction of GED treatment for EL. How many times are these people going to make me say the same thing? I may actually die from old age before I'm ever actually able to get away with not having to repeat myself to people like this. But here we go again, right? And then we'll go ahead and close out. I think that's good for right now. Sudden violence being visited upon my person out of nowhere is going to stop me in whatever I am doing at the time. It's called shock. It's pretty damn normal. I've said it a billion times, but one more for the road, right? The JRC seems to think that the answer then, if sudden violent things hit you out of nowhere and you're autistic and you're having a behavior and it stops you from the behavior, then that's fantastic and we should continue to do that. It is the most batshit insane, barbaric, and sadistic bullshit I've ever come across. And I've come across some insanity. Okay? That's why I brung up the fact that kids who suffer abuse and go through trauma, when they are gotten away from the abusive parents, will often act out as almost like a subconscious response to the trauma they suffered. When they do act out, the state doesn't go ahead and say to one another, well, they weren't having as violent of outbursts when they were with the abusive parent as what's coming up now. So maybe the parents did know best, and we just need to send them back. Nobody says that. I'm pretty sure you would be not just fired, but you would be registered on every single list in the 50 states and you would probably have a special level order where you would not be able to legally be within 50 miles of any kids in any general direction. But that is the logic that the JRC is asking us to accept. Because it's the same situation. You said, okay, this person should have been sent to adult services a long time ago. We are now in office. We're going to take EL and put them in a facility that could best be able to deal with the issues that do with us older neurodivergent folks. Right? However, the JRC has inflicted unending years, decades of a horrific abuse and torture on EL. So when he went into the new facility that doesn't believe torture is the answer, just like the kid gotten out of the abusive situation will act out due to the trauma, that's what EL did. And everything that they listed on there, anybody who's ever gone through any form of abuse would be able to read that list and automatically, right off the bat, recognize it for what it is. And apparently, the answer here is that they just don't value us neurodivergent kids the same way they value neurotypical kids. At least when it comes to the JRC, and sadly throughout the entirety of Massachusetts state. They would never do that to a neurotypical child. But because, even if it's something subconscious, they do not view kids like us as kids, because we're not looked at as human beings. Because we're looked at as a group of symptoms, burdens, problems, puzzles to be solved. Things like this, where very obvious abuse is going on, but because through abuse we learn to project to others what they wanted to see so we could at least get some small amount of relief from the constant abuse, they send us back in a way they'd never do to a neurotypical child. And folks, we got to talk about it that way. It's horrifying and bleak to say it like that, but the fact of the matter is, it is that horrifying. It is that bleak. It is that evil. Until we address it for what it is, we are going to continue to spin our wheels and go nowhere for another series of decades while the JRC continues to traumatize generation after generation after generation of kids. We're going to go ahead and close out on that. We don't get very many views on this channel. The few we do get do tend to get removed from time to time. So please, folks, don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe. Please don't forget to utilize the comments. I appreciate your time. As always, folks, we here at Smelling Tea do hope you have a good one. I'm going to see you all here in a few minutes. Bye-bye, everyone.